The biggest offseason question facing the Bengals is about Tee Higgins. Should they re-sign him? Should they tag him? Should they tag and trade him? I think the answer is becoming more and more clear. Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien, and we are part of the Big Play Network here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Make sure you catch us every single Tuesday night at 8 Eastern on CBT and weekly on Bally Sports. I'll be joined by Andrew Miller coming up in just a bit. But before we get to Andrew and answer what is probably the biggest question facing the Bengals this offseason, and I've seen a lot of people discuss Tee Higgins and what Tee Higgins' future should be, whether it's in Cincinnati, whether it's in free agency. Heck, there are people in Cleveland and Jacksonville and all these different cities hoping that their team signs him in free agency. Well, I have bad news for you. Tee Higgins is not becoming a free agent. Now, could he join a new team this offseason? Absolutely he could. And honestly, I think that's probably the best case scenario for all involved. Now, I'm not here saying I wouldn't re-sign Tee Higgins, because I absolutely would. 25-year-old, really productive player, to me, is about to enter his prime, even though he dealt with some injuries this past year. I would not label him injury prone like some have. And so you look around the league and Tee Higgins has a lot of value. Tee Higgins is someone that can be a difference maker for any offense. And we've seen it for the Bengals over the past 4 seasons. But I don't think a deal is going to get done. And if a long-term contract doesn't get done and you're not letting him leave in free agency, do you really want to pay him nearly $22 million this year to stay for 1 season and then leave and go elsewhere? I do not. I want the asset. I would make the move, and I would make the move, the trade, and we'll discuss possible returns on investment, what you could get in a possible trade for T. We'll discuss that in just a second. But I'm saying this even though last month, and you're going to hear from him, Joe Burrow said that they want to keep Tee Higgins this season. Here's what Joe had to say.
Obviously, we'd love to have T back. He's a big part of what we've done here. And it's no secret, our relationship. So, I expect T to be back. I think that's the sentiment in the locker room. We all want T back. We know what kind of player he is. We know what kind of person he is. He's what being a Bengal is all about. So, like you said, we'll see. But I think we should have a good opportunity.
Over the past few years, when free agents have come in to potentially come here and ultimately sign here, you've been a part of that, trying to do your part. Can you have a role in guys that could potentially hit free agency like T? Is there anything there that you can get involved with, or do you just got to kind of sit on the sidelines?
T knows. I know T wants to be here. T knows that we want him here. There's not much to say on that aspect. I think everybody's expectation is that T's going to be back. So, like I said, we'll see. The offseason plays out in crazy ways that you don't really expect, but I'd love to have T back. I know he wants to be back. I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for myself. I expect him to be back. It's, I know everybody in the locker room wants him back. So, like I said, we'll see. Offseason's a crazy thing. You never know how it's going to play out. That's
Joe Burrow on Tee Higgins. And look, no surprise there. Of course, Joe Burrow wants to keep Tee Higgins. At the same time, I think this Bengals front office needs to figure out exactly how they can make themselves as good as they can be in 2024 and beyond. And we're going to get into the draft coming up in just a few minutes here. And before we do that, let's discuss what Tee Higgins' potential trade value could be. And for more on that, let's bring in Andrew Miller. Andrew, what would your reaction be as a Bengals fan if you heard today, and it can't happen today, it won't happen today, but if you heard today that Tee Higgins was traded for a top 40 pick in the NFL draft in April, let's say to the Panthers at 33 or the Titans, Brian Callahan's Titans at 38, what would your reaction be?
I mean, first of all, I'd be surprised. I feel like that doesn't happen very often with the Bengals. But second of all, I would be just glad that we got value for him, all things considered in that scenario. But let me be clear. I'm of the stance that I want to see T in 2024 on this team just for one more year. I feel like this is a great opportunity. New Orleans Super Bowl. I'm just saying, I want to look at it and say no regrets. Like what I don't want what could have. If T's here, I'll know what would have. So
wow.
Yeah.
So you're okay playing out. See, we're going to debate now. I didn't realize you felt this way. There, to me, in a wide receiver heavy draft,
right,
especially in the top 40 picks,
Mhm.
if you can get one, and I do, I think Carolina would give up the 33rd pick. I think Arizona would consider giving up the 35th pick, the Titans at 38. Maybe you have to go outside of the top 40 and settle for 41 from Green Bay, because as good as those young wide receivers are in Green Bay, I don't think they have a number one there. T could be that number one. There's a lot of options. And I didn't mention the Giants. I didn't mention Washington, who has 2 picks, 30 in the 30s, that they could ship one of those to the Bengals for just a stud receiver opposite what would be, a really good wide receiver core there in Washington. So I think they have options.
Sure.
And so you're out on that idea. You want to run it back with Tee Higgins for one more year, knowing it could be the Jesse Bates route, and he'll likely sign elsewhere next offseason.
I don't know that I would necessarily say I'm out on the idea. I want them to field offers. I want them to be open to what is, being presented to them as far as value for T. I'm okay with it. Mm-hmm. But my default position is that I don't know that you're going to draft Tee Higgins in the draft, and neither did the Bengals. Who could know, right? Assuming, especially if you're losing Tyler Boyd, you're keeping consistency at a position that is critical in terms of weapons for Joe Burrow, who, by the way, we just heard wants him there. Why not try to run it back? Why not try to get another shot at that Super Bowl and not wonder, hey, could we have done that again if T was on the team? Could we have made that happen if T had been there? We won't have to wonder. This is the year, I feel like, where you've got an opportunity to keep him around for that extra season and make a run at it. So why not?
Because it's going to cost them $22 million in cap space, prevent them from going after the defensive tackles that they should go after, the offensive tackle, and they can get an asset versus losing him potentially for nothing next offseason. And I know the compensatory picks and stuff, but now we're getting into 2026 potential compensation for T. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. And I think what it comes down to me, and why I'm trade T, because T's my guy. Love T. And I told him this. I said, I would tag and trade you if I couldn't re-sign you. And I would re-sign him. I've been in the camp of re-signing him all along.
Sure.
And I think Jesse Bates is the perfect example. You lose Jesse Bates, and what is he doing? He's shining. You drafted him. You developed him. He's become a really, really high-end safety. Well, Tee Higgins, you drafted him. You developed him. He's in the process of becoming, to me, one of these high-end receivers. He's gotten stronger every year. He's gotten better at contested catches every year. The numbers didn't show it this year. They didn't. But I think all of the injuries piled up next year, I think he's going to shine wherever he is. So to your point, makes a lot of sense from a football standpoint. But I think if you're going to tag him and keep him, just pay the man his money and keep him for the next 4 years.
And I'm okay with that too.
Going to do that, then give me the assets in return so you can quickly turn the page and add a Brian Thomas or add one of these stud wide receivers that are in this draft class.
And that's fair. Yeah. And look, they want to sign him to a long-term deal. That's fine too. But I'm thinking the most likely scenarios that won't happen. And under those circumstances, keep T another year, figure out there's other ways to address it, right? Other positions, defensive tackle's huge. I know they need to address that, obviously. Whether it's the draft, whether it's free agency, there's so many scenarios. But I know one scenario in terms of getting the Super Bowl, I feel a lot better if Tee Higgins is on this roster. Championship. Let's go.
Andrew Fox Miller's new nickname is Andrew Higgins. Calling you that from now on. Up next, the Bengals have the 18th pick in the 2024 NFL draft. Could they take a wide receiver? What other positions are they looking at? I know a lot of people are focused on the trenches. We will discuss the NFL draft post Senior Bowl coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien along with Andrew Fox Miller. Make sure you tune in every single Tuesday at 8 Eastern on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. And Andrew, I think a lot of people look at this draft and it's offensive tackle or bust. Offensive tackle or bust. And you've seen that, I'm sure. You got to address the offensive line. You got to fix the offensive line. Well, I was paying attention last week, as I'm sure a lot of our viewers were, to the Senior Bowl. And I think it's really interesting because there are a lot of tackles. Tyler Guyton was emerging, and there are different options in that offense, in this offensive tackle class. And I think there's at least one offensive lineman that people are probably talking about now, but it's not an offensive tackle. And I want to officially put him out there with, I don't know, about 7 weeks away from the NFL draft or so. Heck, no, wait, no, it's 9 weeks. What am I thinking? Really bad at math. About 9 weeks, over 2 months before the NFL draft. And to me, I look at it, and Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon, he is someone stood out to me. And here's why. He's a guard and a center. He could come in and play guard day one. And if you need a backup for Ted Karras, he could be that too. And then he can be Ted Karras' successor down the line. Or if you decide you want to re-sign Ted Karras, that's fine. He gives you the flexibility because he plays both guard spots. You're talking about a stud, a 320-pound, 21-year-old that shined at the Senior Bowl and is someone that can play all three interior offensive line positions. Everyone's talking about offensive tackle for the Bengals at 18, and I totally get it. I also think that, and who knows what happens in free agency, maybe they sign a Michael Onwenu from the Patriots that can play right tackle. If that's the case, or if they sign Jermaine Illuminor, I do think that there's one center guard interior offensive lineman that they could target with that 18th pick, and fans should get to know Jackson Powers Johnson.
That's interesting, because the whole time you're saying that, I'm like, James, what about tackle? What about tackle? What about tackle? Because that's going to be, offseason repeats itself, I feel like, with Bengals and expectations and needs. But yeah, I like versatility, and especially if you're going to have someone that's going to be a depth piece, and that certainly would be, considering what we have intact at that in the interior offensive line. So yeah, I like it. Sure, why not? But again, I would love to see what they will do to address tackle, because we assume it's not Jonah Williams. So yeah, is it free agency? Is that free agent that they end up acquiring going to be reliable 17 games postseason? And what's that going to cost? I don't know. I mean, it's a whole nother question for another time, but I feel like if you're going to draft offensive line, you would assume reliability at the tackle position. I'd love to see what they do in free agency with that considered.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I look at where they could go with the 18th pick, and one position I hadn't really talked about was center/guard. And Jackson Powers Johnson is in there, along with offensive tackle. I think offensive tackle is the leader. There are plenty of guys that they could draft. J.C. Latham, Marius Mims. There's Tyler Guyton is the guy that kind of shined at the Senior Bowl and kind of put his name in the mix there. A bunch of guys that they could target at 18 that would fill that right tackle role potentially. But defensive tackle is certainly in there. Jerzon Newton out of Illinois is in the mix. Multiple other defensive tackles. Wide receiver, I mentioned Brian Thomas. I think wide receivers certainly in consideration there. And then cornerback. There are multiple cornerbacks that I think are going to be in this mix. Mitchell out of Toledo, someone that shined really bright at the Senior Bowl. PFF's highest graded corner over the past couple of seasons. And he played for Toledo. So it's kind of Sauce Gardner vibes to a degree, where you have this potential shutdown corner that's not going to one of these mainstay schools. And so you have to really dive in and see, is this legit, or is it his competition? The Senior Bowl, he showed he could play with the big boys. So we'll see on him. But those are some of the options. I just want to make sure people know about Jackson Powers Johnson, because I think, one, he could start day one. He could push Cordell Volson. And what that would do from a depth standpoint, it doesn't mean he would start over Cordell. Maybe Cordell takes a leap, right? But what it would do from a depth standpoint is you would have at least a quality. You're talking about either Cordell, who has 2 years of starting experience, or Jackson Powers Johnson as your first lineman off the bench for the interior, whether it's either guard spot or center. Obviously, Jackson Powers Johnson would be the one that would play center. I like the idea of that. Will they go that route? They haven't drafted a guard in round one since Kevin Zeitler, but they haven't taken a defensive tackle in round one since 1994. So we will see. Had to throw that name out there. Plenty of time. We will be at the Combine later this month to get more on JPJ and the rest of the 2024 NFL draft class. Up next, it's Super Bowl week. And Patrick Mahomes, well, he's this close to getting his third ring. Will he, or will the 49ers take it home. Andrew and I will make our Super Bowl predictions coming up next. Welcome back in to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox Miller. I'm James Rapien, and Super Bowl 58 is almost here. Ooh, rock hard place. It continues because I think all of Cincinnati was rooting for the Detroit Lions in the NFC Championship game. That didn't happen. I admittedly said Bengals fans should be rooting for the Chiefs over the Ravens. That part worked out. Now, even though the 49ers have beat the Bengals in 2 Super Bowls, Andrew, in Super Bowl 16 and 23, I lean 49ers as far as who to root for. Where are you at? Are you rooting for the Chiefs to dethrone the 49ers and prevent them from winning their 7th ring? Or do you want the 49ers to handle business against Patrick Mahomes and company?
I muster as much energy as I possibly can to actually care, James. I'm going to go 49ers as well as far as rooting interest. Who wins, though? Who we predict would win, another story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Who you picking to win?
Look, I think Chiefs win this. I do. I know they're not favored. I know it's going to be a close game no matter what, I think. But it just feels like another Chiefs year, right?
No, I disagree. We can think of a wager if you want to. No, I've been on the 49ers throughout this process. And the past leading up to this, since the conference championship games ended. If the Ravens got their head out of their rear, they should have beat the Chiefs, even with the rough start. The Chiefs ended that game on a whimper. And meanwhile, I think Brock Purdy and company, they're going to be pretty confident going into this game. Now, Kansas City's defense is for real. Patrick Mahomes isn't turning the ball over. And that's a huge factor of how he's kind of running things, knowing that they don't have the weapons they've had previously. But I think the 49ers can get some pressure on Patrick Mahomes. I think they can force him into a mistake or two and prevent Isaiah Pacheco from running for $150 or something like that. Meanwhile, this 49ers offense, they have weapons on weapons. And I think Christian McCaffrey is going to have a huge game, win Super Bowl MVP with multiple touchdowns. Let's say he finishes with 5+ catches as well. I think the 49ers win by 3 and cover that 1.5 point spread.
I think Chiefs win this. I think if I were to do any sort of score prediction, I'm just gonna go out there and say I think it'll be like 31-24 Chiefs. Like, I think that's just what's gonna happen.
What?
They're gonna need more than 17 like they did against the Ravens. The Chiefs are gonna need more than 17. I get it.
31.
Giving Andy Reid an extra week to prepare. Kelsey's playing his best football of the season. I just think it's a weird recipe. I'm just worried about 49ers coming out flat. That's what I'm worried about most.
I agree with you. I agree with you there. They can't come out flat again and expect to win this game. Because if you get down by multiple scores, like they've done now in back-to-back weeks, if you do that, it's going to be tough to overcome that defense for the Chiefs. You have Chris Jones in the middle, and I don't think they would abandon their game plan at all, but I think the teams are close enough to where they can't just flip the switch like they did against Detroit, for example. But I don't think they'll get off to that start. I think that they'll get off to a better start. One quick thing, and it's not Taylor Swift. How much are you looking forward to the halftime show with Usher?
I'm okay with that. I mean, it's a bit of throwback. It's an era I obviously enjoy growing up, so I'm good with it. It doesn't thrill me. Like, I don't, you know what I mean?
It's weird that Taylor Swift is going to be there. So it's the biggest star on the planet, and she's just going to be watching.
Is she?
I mean, she'll be there. Yeah.
We assume.
At the Super Bowl?
I don't know, but could you imagine how wild it'd be if like it surprised everyone and that naturally like I actually got out on stage, like
Performed? Oh.
It would, yeah. People would forget what the score is.
Well, if that happens, will Travis Kelce, because Travis Kelce would know in advance, will he pull an Evan McPherson and be hanging on the sideline?
You're Travis Kelce, you can afford to, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it might be interesting because this could be his last game on Sunday. But up next, from Super Bowl 58 to the Pro Bowl games, Jamar Chase did his best Chad Ochocinco Johnson impression. Who did it better? That's next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien, joined by Andrew Fox Miller. And Andrew, let's close up shop with Jamar Chase. Jamar scored 2 touchdowns on Sunday in the Pro Bowl games. the AFC losing by 5, even though he was open on the final play. But what he did after a touchdown has a lot of headlines and caught a lot of Bengals fans' attention for sure. Grabbing the camera from the cameraman, the iconic Chad Ochocinco Johnson celebration from 2007. He brought it back 17 years later. I remember that game. Chad scored 3 touchdowns against the Titans. It was a bright spot in what was otherwise a down year for the Bengals. What was your reaction when you saw Jamar do his Ochocinco impression?
Look, anytime the current generation of players on this team give some sort of a nod, salute to the greats of the past, I love it. I love it.
I love it too. I think it's really cool because Chad, in my mind, for my money, is the best receiver in franchise history. Some will say Isaac Curtis. I say Chad. And Jamar's on his way to surpassing all of them, which I think we can all agree with. So we'll see if he can do that, but certainly impressed in the Pro Bowl games. And, well, that's going to do it for us. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on Cincinnati Bengals Talk on YouTube and catch us every single Tuesday at 8 Eastern right here on Enter the Jungle and weekly on Bally Sports. For Andrew Fox Miller, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching.